Hi Year 9, this is Mr. Tapley here for your next lesson of Year 9 Humanities. So this lesson we're looking at developing our understanding of the different systems of government in Australia and China. So I think the best way to understand our own system of government is to compare it to another country, to kind of get both perspectives on how you can set up a country's government. We'll be looking at Australia and China in this lesson. Success criteria is to identify similarities and differences between the systems of government in Australia and China. See what's working, what's not, and maybe reflect on what that means. So the fact that these countries are very different, what does that mean for the people in those countries? What does it mean for the governments? So Australia has a democratic political system. So we've talked about that before. It's a system of government for the people. So the people's interests are being represented by the politicians. It's a system of government of the people. So the people who are voted in are normal people. They're not kings or princes or princesses, etc. And it's a system of government by the people. So people being voted in are being voted in by the people. Whereas China has a communist political system. So their ideology, their beliefs is that all people are equal. That's what communism is about. And the ruling party, political party in China is the CCP, so the Chinese Communist Party. There's some debate about whether China really is a communist country or if they have a authoritarian or autocratic government. So an autocracy. Holy shit, Tom. Hi Year 9, Mr. Tapley here to take you through our next lesson of Year 9 Humanities. This lesson will be looking at developing our understanding of the different systems of government in Australia and China. I think the best way to better understand our own system of government is to compare it to another nation's, get another perspective on how a system of government can be set up in a country. Success criteria is to identify similarities and differences between the systems of government in Australia and China, and then maybe reflect on what that means for those people in those countries. So, Australia has a democratic political system, which we should know by now. So that's for the people, of the people, by the people. Whereas China has a communist political system, where all people are equal. That's their main belief, their ideology. There's some debate about whether China truly is a communist country or whether they have a autocracy. That's their system of government, where one person or a small group of people has all the power. I'm not going to get into that debate. All you need to know is that China's ruling political party, their political beliefs, is the CCP, so the Chinese Communist Party. In Australia, there are governing structures and processes to ensure a separation of powers. So what that means is that there's not one person or one group of people with all the power. We have local governments like the Monash government who have different powers over different things. We have the state governments, the national governments. Even the national government doesn't get to enforce the laws. They can create laws, but the courts, the justice system, are responsible for, crime and punishment. So we have a separation of powers. In China, it's a bit different. In China, all of the power is held by the government. So they have total unrestricted power, which is, there are strengths and weaknesses to both systems. Again, I'm not going to get into which one is better or worse. You can look at the coronavirus response in China, where we discussed that in a previous lesson. China has all the power in one hand, which means that they can make very quick, very rapid decisions that had an effective response on coronavirus in China. Whereas in my old mate's country, America, our coronavirus response has been an absolute shambles because we've got 50 nifty United States who are all doing their own thing, and then we've got Donald Trump who's doing Lord knows what. So there are different voting processes also in both nations. China has elections, and they have a simple majority system, which means that whoever has the majority of votes wins. Ta-da. In Australia, we're more complicated. Just to make you guys unhappy. In Australia, we have a preferential and a proportional voting system. I'm not going to get into that too much detail, what that means. That's a topic for another week. But what that basically means is that when you get into the voting booth, you don't vote for one person. You don't vote for one political party. You're getting a list of the different political parties in Australia, and you put in your preferences. So 1 through 5, 1 through 10. So my favorite to my least favorite political party or political politician. And then proportional, what that means is basically percentages. So we have a different population in Victoria to Northern Territory. We've got more people. So it's not really fair to give us the same amount of votes as the people in Northern Territory, because then they're always going to lose out. So that's just a bit of mathematics that occurs to make sure that every individual and every state is considered equal. These different political structures and systems of government result in differing levels of individual freedoms and human rights. So the right to vote, freedom of speech, etc. Basically, the amount of freedom or individual rights you have in your country is usually dependent on the type of government in charge. Phew, sorry, I'm losing my breath. So what are we doing this lesson? Well, to reflect upon the effectiveness of our political system, we will use this lesson to compare Australia and China. So using this link here, which is a little Google website that one of the Year 9 civics teachers made all the way back in 2017, but we've been updating it every year. It's been improved. Using that website there, you'll be examining the structure of the government, the voting processes, the separation of powers, and the individual freedoms in Australia and China. So your lesson activities for the next 2 lessons, so it's a double period, or it might be 1 period today, 1 period in our next lesson. For 2 lessons, you'll be completing the Australia and China learning task in Google Classroom assignments. So it's just a little Google Doc file where you put in some information about the systems of government in Australia and China, and then identify some similarities and differences. I'll show you where that is in a moment. I'll start off by saying that if you have any questions, though, please let me know. I don't think you need to do any independent research. I think all the information for this task is in that website. But if you'd like to, or if you're having some trouble finding information, feel free to do a bit of independent research if you require it. So I'll show you where that website is. Clicking on that link there takes you here. And you can see we've got information about Australia. That's just the home page, but you've got Australia's political system here. Need to make those photos a bit smaller, I think. Features of Australian political systems, so the levels of government, separation of powers, they talk about the constitution. And here's China. Talk about the CCP, Communist Party, etc., etc. So what you're going to do is use that website to complete the SEM 2 learning task, Australia and China. You open that up and you get a nice looking Google Doc that looks like this. And all you need to do is go down, you've got Australia on the left, China on the right, and you just answer these little subheadings here. So, political parties, who are the ruling political parties in Australia? So in China, you've got the CCP, I mentioned that before. Who are the different political parties in Australia? So China should be easy because you've only got one. Australia actually have more than one political party. There's one in charge at the moment, but there's more than one political party in Australia, and I'd like you to list them out there. Constitution. So what is the constitution like in Australia? Does China have a constitution? What does it say? And then how do you change it? So in Australia, we know we have a referendum, we have a national vote to change our constitution. How do you change the Chinese constitution? Voting and election. So what sort of voting processes do they have in each country? How often do they hold an election? Every 2 years, every 9 years? Does everyone get to vote in the election, etc.? Separation of powers. So who has the power to create laws, to enforce the laws, etc., etc. Rights and freedoms. So look at the individual human rights and freedoms in those countries. So some countries will have different levels of human rights. You could look at freedom of speech, freedom of information. There's something called the Great Firewall of China, which impacts the amount of information that Chinese citizens can get from the government. So certain websites like Google, Facebook, I was going to say TikTok, but it's not TikTok, there's another one, I can't remember, are banned in China. So that might be an infringement on their human rights, in your opinion. Similarities between both systems of government, differences, and then you're done. So it's not going to be essay-length responses. You do have a double period to smash this out, so you've got plenty of time, I think, to get some good responses in. But it's really a couple sentences, couple dot points for each of these little boxes. And yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, best of luck, guys. Cheers.